Today's topic is advanced analytical technique to evaluate the quality of potato and potato starch. Potato with high quality can produce very good processed potato product. So we need to know how we determine the quality of the potato and potato starch. First part is potato analysis and quality evaluation. So first one is the dry matter and specific gravity. Dry matter of potato is major determinant of the texture of raw or cooked product. So texture is very important of the sensory attribute because it contributes to flavorable mouthfeel and consumer acceptance. Specific gravity can be determined using this equation. So weight in air and weight in water. Using two values, we can determine specific gravity. So also specific gravity and dry matter content vary among the tuber of the same plant and across different parts of tuber. It is highest in outer cortex area and lowest in the inner pith area. And degree of the variation vary with cultivar and with environment. Total solid content of the potato can be obtained by freeze drying. So dry matter can be determined from the difference in the weight of potato sample before and after freeze drying. And potato dry matter can also estimate from the specific gravity measurement. Recently, near-infrared spectroscopy has been used to measure the specific gravity of potato. Next is the sugar. Sucrose, fructose, and glucose are three major sugars in potato, and the sugar content of tuber vary with potato variety and storage temperature. For example, when you store potato very low temperature, sugar content can be increased by cold-induced sugar accumulation. So analysis sugar is carried out using the high-performance liquid chromatography and high-performance anion exchange chromatography and gas chromatography. Gas chromatographic analysis of reducing sugar requires conversion of sugar into the suitably volatile derivatives such like additor, acetate, and trimethylserine ether. The level of reducing sugar in potato is important in processing. Actually, this one is really important because frying at high temperature results by a reaction between sugar and amino acid. So this reaction yielding dark color and bitter taste. So proper sugar content is very important in the fried potato product. Acceptable upper limit of reducing sugar content to obtain acceptable processing color is 0.25 to 0.5% of fresh weight. Another value of raw sugar level in potato is during high temperature processing, sugar can interact with asparagine to produce acrylamide. Actually, this one is carcinogen, so it must be considered when processing potato. Every producer tries to reduce acrylamide content by controlling sugar content. To determine the free sugar content, homogenized potato sample is mixed with hot water for 60 minutes to extract the sugars. Glucose, fructose, sucrose, lactose, and maltose can be quantified by extraction into the hot water, followed by HPLC analysis. Next is the total starch content. Total starch content can be determined from fresh potato tuber or dry matter using enzymatic hydrolysis. Generally, potato starch can be completely dissolved by cooking the sample in presence of summer-stable alpha amylase followed by amyloglucosidase to hydrolyze starch to glucose. After hydrolyze all starch inside the potato, then glucose content is measured by calorimetric procedure or biochemical analyzer. So calculate starch content is calculated as glucose times 0.9 because hydrolyze the starch means removal of the water from the starch. We using this factor. Next one is dietary fiber. Total dietary fiber content of potato dry matter is determined according to AACC method 32-05 following the total dietary fiber assay procedure. This is gravimetric method is simpler and faster than other analysis method. Also, to total dietary fiber content, both soluble and insoluble dietary fiber content can be determined by this method. Here is the method. Principle of this method is outlined like that. Sample of potato dry matter are cooked at 100 degrees C with heat-stable alpha amylase to gelatinize starch and hydrolyze the starch inside potato. Incubate at 60 degrees C with protease to stabilize, solubilize, and depolymerize the protein, and amyloglucosidase also add to hydrolyze starch fragment to glucose. It's very similar procedure with the starch content, but in this case, protease also added. Treat with 4 volume of the ethanol to precipitate soluble fiber and remove the depolymerized protein and glucose. Then reduce its filter rate, washing with 78% ethanol, 95% ethanol and acetone, and dry and wait. The duplicate is the analyzed for protein content, and other is heat at 525 degrees C to determine ash content, and total dietary fiber is the weight of the dry residue less the weight of the protein and ash. So it's very simple. Inside the potato, remove starch, remove protein, and determine remainder thing and analyze ash content. The remaining thing is total dietary fiber. So next parameter is the protein content. Protein content for dry matter can be determined using nitrogen analyzer such as ThermoQuest-C instrument, and protein content is calculated by multiplying the nitrogen content by a factor of 6.25. Also, we can determine the nitrogen content using Kildare analysis technique. Next one is amino acid content. Most abundant amino acids found in potato are asparagine and glutamine. Free amino acids can be extracted from freeze-dried tuber extract, and their concentration determined using reverse-based HPLC. Next parameter is lipid content. Potato contain a small amount of lipid comprising approximately 0.1% of fresh weight of tuber. Despite the minute quantity, lipid display the important role in stability of processed potato products. So, Repeat degradation can lead to a flavor and rancidity. Repeat content can be determined using thin layer chromatography or gas chromatography. Next parameter is texture. Texture is really important and complex quality characteristics. It is determined by variety and by structure and biochemical property of potato tuber tissue with some environmental influence. The texture or firmness of the cooked potato is evaluated by subjecting each sample to compression test using universal test machine equipped with rod cell. So simply, this is cooked potato and rod cell compress this potato, and we can determine the firmness of the sample. Cooked potato cylinders are compressed in single site compression, and the compression test and texture of the processed potato can also be measured by shearing using a single blade 1 mm thick attached to the crosshead of the instrument test machine. Slaughtering and discoloration of the potato during the cooking is major attribute of texture can be measured by directly. Actually, slaughtering is very important parameter when determining texture of French fry or some steamed potato. And in this test, potato is cooked and sieved, and the mass of the remaining the cooked potato tissue on sieve is recorded. So actually this test is very simple, but we can easily determine the slaughtering result. Next one is sensory. Actually, sensory analysis is very difficult thing, but their result sometimes very important. Sensory evaluation of cooked potato quality is based on appearance and mouthfeel scored by trained or untrained evaluator using some form of the head-weight scale on which the assessor record a perceived value of the attribute on the 9-point scale from extreme like to extreme dislike. Commonly used for classification for evaluation of cooked potato is 4 types: A. Firm, non-mere; B. Firm, slightly mere; C. Rather loose, mere; and D. Loose, very mere. Small number of attributes is generally considered to account for most of variation. These attributes include diffraction, leanness, graininess, firmness, hardness, springiness, chewiness, and moistureness. Next parameter is color. Color also very important for in all form of potato product, boiled, baked, fried, and chipped. For most other purposes, both before and after processing, color is measured using calorimeter, such as Minotaur chromometer. The instrument is calibrated against standard white reference and Hunter L whiteness, A greenness, B yellowness value were determined for each sample and made directly from the potato surface. Next parameter, glycemic index. Glycemic index measure of the effect of consumption of carbohydrate food on blood glucose level. Ranking of carbohydrate on scale from 0 to 100 according to postprandial impact on blood glucose level. And it is defined as the incremental error under the glucose response curve associated with 50-gram carbohydrate portion of test food expressed as a percent of the response amount of carbohydrate from standard food taken by same subject. So actually standard food is normally white bread. Here is the detailed method for glycemic index. Portion of food test should contain 50 grams of the glycemic carbohydrate, and glucose response should be measured in capillary or blood at 0, 15, 30, 45, 60, 9, and 20 minutes after commencement of meal. Area under the curve is calculated geometrically using trapezoid rule. Either whole white bread or glucose can be used as standard food. And GI rating is calculated by dividing AUC for the test food by AUC for the reference food and multiplying by 100. Also, glycemic index can be determined using in vitro test. It is much simpler, but if you want to real glycemic index, we can use this protocol. So next part is potato starch analysis. First one is isolation of potato. It's very simple. Soaking is carried out using an aqueous solution of sodium bisulfate at controlled pH to prevent biochemical reaction. Actually, this one is some kinds of enzyme-induced browning reaction. Actually, PPO and oxygen and polyphenol can react and make some yellow pigment. To inhibit this biochemical reaction, we add sodium bisulfite. Generally, starch granule can be liberated from the tuber by disrupt of the parenchyma cell wall. This is done during the tuber disintegration by cylindrical drum or drum containing rotary saw blade on circumference or juice extractor for extraction on small scale. To determine the next one is the amylose. To determine amylose content of starch, iodine reaction has been most commonly used because amylose and amylopectin have a different ability to bind iodine. And this method, such as blueberry, absorbs at 680 nanometer for starch iodine complex using amylose and amylopectin. And amylose content of starch may also determined by measuring the melting enthalpy of amylose and lipid complex using differential scanning calorimetry. But to my opinion, using the iodine is better compared to this DSC. Next one is amylopectin. It can be enzymatically debranched using debranching enzyme like isoamylase and fluorinase, and then subject to SIDS exclusion chromatography and high-performance anion exchange chromatography with pulse and porometric detection are the two basic techniques used to estimate chain length and chain length distribution of amylopectin. A multi-angle laser like scattering detector used with side exclusion chromatography has been applied for the determination of molecular weight and molecular weight distribution and degree of debranching of amylopectin. So here is the example for the result of high-performance anion exchange electron chromatography. Last time I explained about this one. Next one is separation of amylose and amylopectin. Separation amylose and amylopectin complex formation with butanol. Actually, amylose can bind with butanol. It can make some inclusion complex with butanol. Only amylose can form inclusion complex with butanol. So when we recover this complex, then we can separate amylose and amylopectin. Phosphorus and phosphate ester. Potato starch usually contain 0.01 to 0.6% phosphorus. Phosphorus is part of reasonable for high swelling power, paste stability, and resistance to enzyme hydrolysis of potato starch. Also, because of charged nature of phosphate monoester, electrostatic repulsion between molecules increase, and the property of starch gelatinization and paste change. The phosphorus content can be determined by wet oxidation of the starch with sulfuric acid and hydrogen peroxide, followed by calorimetric estimation of the phosphomonohydrate phosphomonobriate complex. Next one is starch granule. Various methods are used to study starch structure, like morphology and internal arrangement. Microscopy showed distribution of various structure in granule and some their details. The complementary method of scanning, electron microscopy, atomic force microscopy, and transmission electron microscopy have been widely used in recent years. So granular structure, each of above technique has a specific advantage. Light microscopy is used to identify the type of starch from size and shape of granule and halo position. Halo means central position of starch granule. Using polarized light microscopy, all potato starch exhibit a dark multiclose ring and bipresent pattern. I already explained that bipresent pattern results from the crystalline structure of starch. So we also determine the crystalline degree of the crystallinity using polarized light microscopy. SEM use a beam electron to illuminate a sample rather than traditional beam of light. It allows the shape and surface feature of starch granule to be viewed in three dimensions. AFM has ability to look at the sample with little or no preparation and does not require ultra-high vacuum or dry sample. One significant advantage for biological system is ability to image sample under wet condition. In case of SEM and TEM, it must be dried before observation, but in case of AFM, we can observe their surface under wet condition. AFM offer advantage of highly localized topographic image as well as qualitative material property imaging for non-topographic insight into granular structure. TEM also powerful technique to look at the very small scale subjects, smaller than those seen with SEM and AFM, but it involves complex preparation technique include either metal shadowing or staining. Normally, uranium acetate is used for staining for TEM. Next one is X-ray analysis. When the crystal is irradiated with X-ray, the X-ray split to form pattern distinctive to the crystal structure, and X-ray radiation interact with starch structure on nanometer scale. Wide-angle X-ray diffraction is sensitive to crystalline odor over distance from above 0.32 nanometer, such as crystallinity in starch granule, and small angle X-ray scattering is usually used for determination longer range information from 1 to 100 nanometer about the alternating crystalline and amorphous lamella in the starch granules. Next one is the FTIR spectrum. An FTIR spectrum of starch has been shown to sensitive change in structure and molecular level. An observance band at 1022 per centimeter and 1047 centimeter are characteristics of the amorphous and crystalline structure in starch. So ratio of both value has been used to express amount of ordered crystalline domains to amorphous domain in starch granule. Next is side extrusion chromatography, HPLC system equipped with water solvent delivery system and two side extrusion chromatocolumn and refractive index detector can be used to study molecular size and size distribution of starch. Next one is swelling. When starch is heated in excess water, crystalline structure is disrupted and water molecule become linked by hydrogen bond to the exposed of hydroxyl group of amylose and amylopectin, and this causes an increase in granular swelling and solubility. Swelling degree can be determined as swelling power or swelling factor, and starch suspension are heated at certain temperature for 30 minutes. The starch sample is centrifuged and supernatant removed, and sediment are weighed to determine swelling power. Actually, swelling power is very easily determined with very simple equipment, so that value is very important. Another thing is amylose reaching starch in water is heat at certain temperature in CO2 for 30 minutes and then cool to room temperature and centrifuge. Supernatant is withdrawn and its amylose content is determined. Next is gelatinization. Various techniques has been employed to prove starch gelatinization, like viscometry, optical microscopy, electron microscopy, differential scanning, calorimetry, X-ray, NMR, FTIR. Among them, I recommend using DSC to determine the gelatinization. Some analytical techniques like DSC are able to detect heat flow change associated with both first order and second order transition of starch polymer. This has been widely employed to study gelatinization, but some of these methods are experimentally limited by certain parameters such like starch and water ratio and temperature range over the gelatinization can be studied. Here is the result of the DSC. I already explained, but I will explain again. When you analyze transition of this peak, from area you can determine the total enthalpy, melting enthalpy, and starting point, peak point, end point. From there, we can determine the gelatinization temperature. Next one is retrogradation. Starch retrogradation has been used to describe change in physical behavior following gelatinization. It is a process that occurs when starch molecules reassociate and form odor structure. Retrogradation property of starch can be analyzed by DSC, X-ray, NMR, FTIR, Raman spectroscopy, and microscopy. Helix and variably ordered semicrystalline array of this helix in retrograde starch can be determined X-ray for crystal pattern and NMR for double helix content or different DSC to observe enthalpy change when retrograded starch structure are lost during heating. Starch rheology next. The most rheological study conducted at temperature lower than 95 and in range of shear rate, sometimes irrelevant to processing condition, and dynamic rheometer allowed continuous assessment of dynamic module during the temperature and frequency swap test of the starch suspension. Rheological property of potato starch also have been widely investigated using Brabender viscoamylograph and rapid viscoanalyzer. Here is the result of RVA rapid viscoanalyzer test pasting profile of potato starch. From this graph result, we can determine pasting temperature. Pasting temperature means, oh, here is some error. This is not a pasting temperature. Pasting temperature is this one. That means the viscosity temperature for viscosity starting to increase. So in this case, the pasting temperature is around 70 degrees C. And also we can obtain the peak viscosity, highest the peak position. And after breakdown of starch granule, the difference between here and peak viscosity, we call it breakdown. And here is a final viscosity. And final viscosity is difference between fruit and setback. In RVA profile of native starch granule generally insoluble in water below 50 degrees C, when starch granules are hit and granule absorb large amount of water and swelling to many times their original size. That's why viscosity is increasing when during heating starch. The viscosity increase on shearing when this swirling granule have two squeeze past each other, and temperature at onset of this rise in viscosity is known to pasting temperature. And pasting temperature provides indication of the minimum temperature required to cook a given sample, and the sufficient number of granules becomes swollen and rapid increase in viscosity occur. Peak viscosity occurs at the equilibrium point between swelling and polymer reaching. Peak viscosity and temperature indicate the water binding capacity of starch. As the temperature increases further and is maintained at high temperature for a period of time, granule rupture and more soluble amylose reach out into solution and undergo alignment. Due to mechanical shearing, granule rupture and subsequent polymer alignment occur, which decrease apparent viscosity of paste. And process is defined as breakdown, and viscosity at this stage given an indication of paste stability. As the system is subsequently cooled, reassociation between starch molecules, especially amylose, occur to various degrees. In sufficient concentration, this usually causes the formation of gel, and viscosity will increase to final. So today I will introduce how we can determine quality of potato and potato starch. Actually, good quality raw potato can result good processed product. So it is very important to determine quality of the potato and potato starch. Actually, to detailedly analyze quality of potato and potato starch, sometimes very high price equipment is required. But for some other parameter, like swelling and throttling tests and some other amylose reaching or some other thing, we can determine their value using relatively cheaper equipment. So today's class is over. Thank you.